Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. I was asked to speak on the subject of Zakah, and I will share with you today a common feature or a shared lesson between Ramadan and Zakah, and I call it the ascension and descension through Zakah and Ramadan. First, let us contemplate on these ayahs of the Quran. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون إن الله هو الرزاق ذو القوة المتين, which translate, and tell them that I have not created the invisible and visible beings, jinn and ins, or jinn and mankind, except that they may serve me. I do not want any sustenance from them, nor do I want them to feed me. Indeed, Allah is the one who provides sustenance, and He is the possessor of power that never fails or invincible. Adh-Dhariyat 56-58. These verses, particularly the first one, are commonly cited to argue for the purpose of creation in Islam. However, we can also read these verses as a response to the superpowers or rulers of the destroyed nations who were destroyed by many forms of punishment and with an involvement of wind in those punishments, as mentioned earlier in this surah, Adh-Dhariyat, the winnowing winds. The argument of many unjust rulers and tyrants is usually based on this underlying notion, to feed God or to sacrifice for the sake of God. Since these corrupted rulers claim themselves as representatives of God, and the one to whom God will grant assistance in protecting their subjects, any unjust law of taxes or taking anything from the people's wealth unjustly is justified by the need for administration and sometimes with the participation of corrupted clerics. They are claimed to be for the need of God or His temple. This line of argument, or something similar to it, is exploited to take advantage of the people who are seeking protection or seeking to ascend to the higher status in the eyes of God. We may also call the latter a corrupted view of spiritual ascension. All of this would lead to a corrupted vision of life, where people will work to fulfill the real purpose. People will work not to fulfill the real purpose of creation and only to be exploited by their unjust rulers. These verses seem to be replying to these arguments. First, Allah makes a firm assertion concerning the purpose of life and the right spiritual ascension. In an account reported from the companion Abdullah ibn Abbas radhiyallahu anhuma, he said, or he interpreted liya'budun as liya'rifun. Hence, the purpose of life is to recognize Allah, and included in it to witness His Jamal and Jalal, His beauty and majesty in the creation. Also, liya'budun can be understood as to serve Allah by becoming the participant in or the channel for the manifestation of His Jamal and Jalal, His mercy and wisdom, and so on and so forth. This is the right vision of ascension. Ma'rifatullah is tied closely with the spiritual journey and ascension in darajat. Second, the Quran refutes the argument that God needed to be fed or provided with sustenance. In fact, Allah is the Razzaq, and His protection is invincible. It never fails, compared to those claiming to be powerful governments. Hence, those nations and civilizations were destroyed due to their corrupted vision of life and spiritual ascension. Instead of helping the people to recognize Allah, His Jamal and Jalal by descending to them and helping them to realize their potential as dignified servants of Allah, these corrupted visions have distorted the right cycle of ascension and descension, of recognizing the divine and helping the humankind. This brings us to the subject of Zakat and Ramadan. From the linguistic perspective, the term Zakah was given two original meanings. In other words, it is of two basic meanings. The first is an-nama or az-ziyadah, which refer to the increasement, the progress, the rise, or I will just say here, amplification. The second is at-taharah, as in at-tazkirah, which means purification. For me, it encapsulates both meanings. It is an amplification and purification at the same time. One may attempt to demonstrate how zakah can be an amplification of the wealth, or even to explain the economic growth at individual and societal level. Yet, I will argue here that zakah is an amplification in the sense that it reflects a progress in the spiritual journey of man. You purify to amplify, and you amplify to purify. In Surah At-Tawbah verse 60, Allah mentions, the alms funds are meant only for the poor and the needy, for those employed to administer the funds, for those whose hearts are attracted to the faith, for freeing slaves, for those in debt, for Allah's cause, and for needy travelers. This is an obligation from Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Muslim scholars have traditionally interpreted this verse as identifying the 8 categories of the proper recipients of zakah. We can observe how multiple senses of need are maintained in those categories. Ultimately, you ascend in your darajat by producing a conducive environment for everyone to be able to fulfill the purpose of creation, to purify and amplify, to ascend and descend, and ultimately to participate in the manifestation of the divine Jamal and Jalal, etc. Thus, you reduce to produce. You also produce a better result of your spiritual journey in order to reduce obstacles in the spiritual journey of others. You reduce to produce, and you produce to reduce. Ramadan also speaks of the same lesson. It is full of contemplation over dissension. There is nuzul al-Quran, nuzul of malaikah, on Laylatul Qadr, and again, the concept of dissension in Zakat of Fitr, making sure everyone can have their breakfast on the breakfast festival Eid. This apart from the lesson of spiritual progress and ascension in many forms of ibadah. In Ramadan, you reduce a part of your physical state in order to produce a better spiritual state. In a sense, it is also a lesson for us to descend in order to ascend, for humbleness and taking care of others. I will end by saying, both zakah and Ramadan taught us to purify and amplify, to reduce and produce, and to descend and ascend. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.